Welcome to this week's edition of the Rock and Roll Ghost podcast. This week, we're happy to have Bear McCreary. A lot of you will know him from his work on such things as The Walking Dead, Battlestar Galactica, Lord of the Rings, Foundation, Godzilla, King of the Monsters, not Kings of the Monsters, and so many other things. He's on to promote this just wild project, the Singularity. It's a concept album, a graphic novel, and it's going to be a multimedia concert experience. Bear, I'm really happy to have you on the show. Thanks for doing this.
Hey, thanks, Brett. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, so the Singularity, man, is I based on the stuff I knew you for, I wasn't expecting what it was, and it's
All right.
it's very cool. It's very it's I guess the easiest definition would be like orchestral metal, uh, would
Yeah,
be.
I don't know what category to put it in, symphonic metal, but there's a little bit of like a lot of different things in there.
Yeah, yeah. But there's this just energy, this very big. It feels, and I hate to date this, and I hope you don't take offense to this, but it feels like the late 90s, early 2000s very much to me. It feels very strong and clear production, and it's just this big wallop of a sound, and it's pretty cool to me. And
I mean, man, I'm
yeah,
not
it's yeah, go
you
ahead.
you just said to me what I think is like the pinnacle of rock production.
Yeah,
I mean, to me, rock from the late 50s to the late 90s, early 2000s was just on this straight line where it just got better and better and better. Not necessarily compositionally, I just mean the sound, the production,
right.
better and better. And in the early 2000s, for me, it started to shift a little. And especially now, you hear a lot of auto tune in it and a lot of like very poppy production techniques sort of infiltrated rock.
Yeah,
And I didn't intentionally want to make it sound like the late 90s, early 2000s, but to hear you say it, it's like, yeah, that's for me probably where I think rock records really like sounded amazing. And there's a part
yeah,
of me that wants to do that.
yeah. There is that. I mean, there is just that intensity of sound. There's space, but there's also a lot going on, and it's going, especially with earbuds. This is why I like listening to some things with earbuds. It's like you really get to kind of hear everything. It's a very full experience, and I would imagine that sound reflects the idea behind it, because you have this grand kind of concept, and it is a concept album.
Yeah.
I'm not 100% sure what the concept is exactly. um,
Well, that's all right, man. I mean,
but
I like to think, the first time people listen to The Wall, they just put on The Wall, listen to it, like,
yeah,
would the story be crystal clear? I don't think it would, and that's one of the strengths of The Wall.
yeah,
It's why I love the form of the concept album, which is different than rock opera
right,
or sort of a rock musical where the story is very overt. There's a graphic novel that I co-created that's coming out from Image Comics where the story is very clear.
yeah,
Um, that story, and it's like it's baked into the record, but to me, the record is an emotional journey. It's
hmm
like you feel that there's a story there, but it's how you feel that really matters the most. And yeah, it all comes from like the kind of music I grew up listening to, which was always very energetic and dense and packed with material and film music. And scores for video games and TV and movies today. I always try to create something that sounds, really big and massive.
hmm
And in a way, I always have to leave room for dialogue and sound effects. And even on a score like Godzilla or God of War, like you hear it, but to me there's something really thrilling about the album format where none of that stuff exists. It's I can use every little frequency spectrum spot. I can fill the aural space with sound, and it's been a blast.
yeah. I don't know if it's just that I'm on like a kick of I've been listening to a lot of hard rock uh from that era, like going as far back as like generally as like Metallica's Black Album,
Yeah.
which I've always been a Metallica fan. I've seen them live, and I think they're amazing. But I've never been a Metallica super fan, and I hadn't listened to anything off of Metallica's Black Album since, I don't know, forever. And
Yeah.
I was like, I forgot how just that was like the culmination of everything meeting. Like, so I hate to say that might be their peak, but the thing is that sometimes with bands, when you look back on them, you see the moment, the inflection point where
Yeah.
everything came together. And I've just been in that kind of headspace. So you listen to this album, like I said, I mostly know you from The Walking Dead. And I guess I wasn't really expecting this, you know what I mean?
Nice.
So I apologize for not, having a better idea of more of your work, because I'm guessing this is like kind of in your, this is in your bones in a lot of ways.
It's in my bones, but very few people have heard it.
Yeah.
I think I'm curious if this surprises people that know my work. I think if they've really paid attention to Battlestar Galactica
Mm.
or Godzilla or God of War, even Lord of the Rings, like I'm always collaborating with artists and doing
Yeah.
songs, and I'm always creating music that feels really like muscular and big. But yeah, man, this format, this genre, like it's allowing me to kind of stretch and
Yeah.
so it's been a blast. And look, man, I mean, I'm a product of the 90s, and
Yeah.
for me, like that 90s rock in particular, I mean, you mentioned the Black Album, like Use Your Illusion was a big influence here. I mean,
Yeah. Yeah.
the
I could
first
see
time I
that.
ever heard orchestra playing with rock, it was
Right.
November Rain. And right around that
Right.
same time, Aerosmith did Dream On live with an orchestra, I think on MTV.
Yeah.
And I just saw this and was like, oh, wait, rock can do that? Because I was listening to film scores. I love film music,
Yeah.
orchestra, and that sort of pulled me over and to start listening to, oh, wait, what was Pink Floyd doing? What was Queen doing? Or, and it was really cool, man. I mean, I realized there was a lot of overlap there.
Yeah. Yeah. No, I we're from probably just about the same generation. And yeah, there was all that, that big stuff that was going on, and you nailed it with what the groups you were mentioning. Yeah, so with this album, you got so many damn people on there. I'm just gonna list off a few. I personally, I really dug the Rufus Wainwright track. There's Slash, Serj Tankian, Joe Satriani, Scotty, and Corey Taylor, Kim Thayil, and probably a bunch of metal people whose names I just don't know. It sounds like a lot of Swedish metal people were on this.
Yeah, I mean Jens Kidman from Meshuggah is one of the, in my opinion, defining metal vocalists for that
Okay.
extreme metal sound
Yeah.
that people associate with metal. I mean, he's among the best and among the first to really do that. And then also it's Gene Hoglan, the drummer. Gene Hoglan is, I think, I'm going to say one of the greatest living metal drummers, if not
Nice.
the greatest. And what he can do with his feet, his double kicks, is ridiculous. It's ridiculous.
Yeah. Yeah, as a former drummer, I've always been in awe of like really good metal drummers, because I'm like, man, I was okay, but I was like, I was never gonna be metal. Like,
Yeah,
Bonham wasn't my guy. My guy was like Stuart Copeland, who was far outside of my set of skills, anyways. But I tried my best.
yeah.
But there it goes. It goes in the line Stewart, Neil Peart. I mean, it kind of goes down that line. So I mean, there is that kind of prog heavy metal sort of thing that lends itself to, I mean, what you've put together here, which is like, I can't say it enough. It just stunned me. It just completely stunned me.
Wow. So
I
I'm
mean,
just curious, like what else stood out to you? You mentioned the Rufus Wainwright track, and I will say anybody that knows Rufus Wainwright
yeah,
probably doesn't expect him to sing on a metal song with double kicks flying.
yeah,
So I'm glad that you mentioned that one. What
yeah.
what else stood out to you? I'm curious.
I mean, just the overall sound. I was, like I said, I wasn't prepared for what I was hearing, I guess, and it was truly like, wow, I'm gonna be listening to this album, I think, a lot. And I got to be honest, at this point in my life, it's like, if I listen to an album, but it has to be something like this where you have to kind of listen. I'm not saying you have to, obviously, because everybody does what they want nowadays, but I think when somebody puts something together that's intended to be consumed in one way, I'm going to be listening to this a lot. I have a feeling.
I appreciate that, man, and I know.
And I also love the spoken word stuff too.
Thank you. Yeah, there's three scenes from the graphic novel that are performed by actors.
Yeah.
And it makes it more sort of narrative. And again, I kind of go back to The Wall, as I do on so many things. Like when you get to the trial at the end of The Wall, if you didn't realize there was a story yet, you'd realize it there.
Right.
So I like the idea, like Lee Pace and Danai Gurira and Ryan Hurst coming in just as characters. They're not singing, they're acting.
Yeah.
These roles that then when you read the graphic novel, it all comes into place. But what I hope is that you don't have to read the graphic novel. You can just you can enjoy any of these things. I wanted to make a record that is emotional and it makes you feel things and stands on its own. And a graphic novel that you don't need to hear the music. It's good. But my hope is that you piece them all together and you get an experience.
Well, you've got the album, you've got the graphic novel, and then you've got the multimedia concert experience. But I've only seen so far one date. Is there a plan to tour
it? Plans are in the works right now. I'm focusing on the one date because I'm also getting all this animation together. I'm creating a custom, basically animated feature to go behind the band that kind of brings the graphic novel to life.
Gotcha.
So we haven't announced any other dates right now. It's May 12 in Los Angeles, but I'm very optimistic that I want to be able to take this thing on the road and sort of develop it as a show, as an experience.
Yeah, it's a really cool idea, and I'm eager to see if it comes in somewhere near me, because I'd check it out for sure.
Awesome, man.
Yeah. And the other thing I just have to think about, I mean, you're talking about a graphic novel, you're talking about an album, you've got a concept, you get the whole thing. Could there be a film?
I mean, absolutely. I mean, that's what happened with The Wall, and Tommy, and like it's happened before. And I think that there is a story there that in the graphic novel that I think is really compelling. I mean, and that's kind of where I have spent the last 20 years, is in film and TV and telling stories in that format. So, anything's possible, man. I mean, right now I've been focusing on getting the record out, getting the graphic novel together.
Obviously.
But, it's definitely something I've been thinking about.
Yeah, cool.
Which is really cool.
I mean, I think it's great that you got three people, like you mentioned, Lee and Danai and Ryan, who obviously you've worked well. See, it's always hard to tell how much interaction would you even have with these people normally, because you're the guy that puts the music together once the thing's been shot and everything.
It was, I had worked with Lee Pace on Foundation. I had worked with Danai on Walking Dead. I had worked with Ryan Hurst on Walking Dead and God of War Ragnarok.
Right.
But it does. Yeah, I'm not on set. And they don't come to they're not in my studio when I'm writing. Right. But there is this sense of community, and so it was very easy to reach out to them. And, they were everybody on this record was so cool to work with and so excited and I think, curious. Everybody was just really excited to be involved, especially like once I sent them some tracks or sent them some examples, So, in a way, it's like after being in the industry for 20 years in this very specific role, I was curious what would happen if I moved into another role. Now I'm reaching out as an artist on a rock record, not as the composer of a movie. But it was great, man. Everybody was really excited.
Yeah. And you've been working on this in some way, shape, or form since you were a teenager, I read.
Yeah. There's a song on here called Escape from the Machines, which is an instrumental. I wrote that song when I was 15.
Wow.
And it's on the record. I'm 45. So I've been working on this 30 years. And in fact, on the record, when you listen to Escape from the Machines, the first 15 seconds are from my high school demo. That's off a cassette tape.
That's nice.
That I recorded with my 4-track Tascam recorder. And you hear my buddy playing guitar when, recorded in my bedroom. And then Gene Hoglan does a drum fill and Slash picks up the same guitar riff. And then Joe Satriani does the improv solo. I'm telling you, man, if you could go back to 1995 and say, one day Slash and Joe Satriani are gonna play
Right.
a song that you just wrote. I don't know what I would have said. It's
And
like
then,
crazy.
yeah, that's pretty mind blowing to think
It's
about.
crazy.
And you have the link there. It's like I like that. I like that that working out of the song you did, that you included the origins of it.
Yeah.
Uh, I would imagine that you had some sort of demo, in place to send people where you were going. How do those demos look when you're sending them to? I mean, do you play most of the instruments? Did you have people in to kind of just do sketches,
Yeah.
or how does that work?
For most of the songs I wrote and produced with my brother Brendan
Right,
McCreary, and he sings, I think, lead on 8 songs. He sang almost all of them at one point because we would
right,
pass files back and forth. That's how we wrote. He would play some stuff, I would play some stuff. And again, I come from film world where
yeah,
demos have to sound amazing. When you say a
yeah,
demo for a director, that's not like a demo for a band. It's
right,
got to be essentially finished and polished. So
right.
the demos they sounded really good. And my
Mhm.
brother is obviously an amazing singer. So the songs got into pretty good shape. And then what we started to do is we would think about the person we would love to have in that role. And, for example, the Rufus Wainwright track.
Yeah.
It's very melodic, it's very operatic and beautiful. And when we decided that Rufus was the singer we wanted to do it, my brother, who had sung an early sketch, did a new demo. And we always had this philosophy where it's like, sing it in a way that Rufus can hear what his voice would sound like.
Hmm.
Not impersonate him necessarily, but move it in that direction. But
Right,
also, yeah, obviously, he'll have room to hear how he could improve it. And
right.
my brother's a very versatile singer, so
Good,
in
good.
some ways, we sort of cast out demos that were like um, almost an example of what that person would sound like. And
Mhm.
some of the other ones, like my guitarist Omer Bensby, who has worked for me as a composer for years, and he's a
Mhm.
brilliant guitarist. Some of the solos on the record, Industrial Revolution is one of them. Some of the guitar solos, I had Omer lay down temporary guitar solos, and I was
Right.
sending them out to Joe Satriani and Slash and everybody, and I would send out 3 or 4 songs, and this song kept getting rejected. No one wanted to play Industrial Revolution, and I started asking people, I go, what is it about this song? And they go, well, that solo's finished. I'm not
Yeah.
gonna. I mean, that solo sounds awesome. What you want to replace that solo? What's wrong with you? So then I realized, like, oh, okay, that solo's done.
Yeah.
So we did that process took about 4 or 5 years, man. It was a long time.
Wow. Wow, that is a
We were
long.
we were mixing for 3 years on this.
Jeez.
Like everything, more or less, everything has been
Yeah.
recorded for 3 years.
Do you do that all at your home studio?
I produce it here, but it's mixed by this guy in Australia named Forrester Saville. He's most known for working with a band called Carnivool. He
Okay.
is a genius. I mean, everything you just said about 20 minutes ago about how it sounds full and yet
Yeah.
you hear everything, that's Forrester, man.
Yeah. Okay.
I'm looking at the waveform. I don't even quite understand how he does it. You
Yeah.
know, so he was also like a big key to, I think, the success of the record because I throw in so much stuff. I feel like I'm a mixer's nightmare. You know what I mean? But he
Yeah.
made it work.
So at this point, I mean, you're doing the most of the work in the studio. You're sending out the tracks. And you're basically. Do you ever have these people actually show up to your place, or is it
Sometimes,
all that they're okay? So it's a mix of
yeah.
them
Like
either coming by
we
if they can, or laying down the track and sending it to you in a file.
yes, and so we tracked drums with Gene Hoglan at a studio down in San Diego.
Mhm.
Um, a lot of the folks in Europe, I obviously just sent them files, and
Yeah.
they would send them back. Other people in LA, we would get together and track for a couple of days. We tracked Scott Ian, at a studio right near me in Venice because he's in the same neighborhood as me. And so it really just depends. But I also found that like with some folks, Corey Taylor, for example, he it took a while to get him to do it. He was excited about it and just needed a window to do it. And he, after agreeing to do the record, it was like almost a year later that he was like, "I've got some time next week. You know, can I track then?" And I was like, I was already Googling studios, you know, in
Right,
his
right,
neighborhood
right.
where he lives, and I was like, "Absolutely, man, no problem." So you know, it was like when people were available,
Yeah.
um, you know, but yeah, like I tracked Slash at his studio. We tracked together. That was really fun. It was always more fun to do it in person where we could.
I would imagine. I would imagine. And I'm guessing that the lengthy time it took to make the album, it helps that you have other things to worry about.
It really does, man. I mean, in that time, I probably would have released this a year ago, except I got hired on a TV show called The Lord of the Rings, The Rings of Power.
Right.
And at that time, 2021, I think the Singularity was at the front burner. I mean, I was going
Yeah.
full steam ahead, and I had to kind of step away for 8 or 9 months to get Lord of the Rings going and write all those themes.
Right.
But I also love that. I love multitasking, and I find it's very helpful in a way to kind of step aside and go, I'm going to go work on something that is completely symphonic. And
Right.
then I'm going to come back and finish my symphonic metal record, you know?
Right. Right.
Um, so yeah, but also it is great that, you know, for me, this was a thing that was more important to be done correctly than to be done quickly.
Yeah.
And after taking all that time and then getting the graphic novel going and getting all those artists together and getting the concert together, I just wanted to do it right, man. And
Mhm.
I was never been in a hurry to get this out, you know.
Yeah. When did the idea for the graphic novel uh come into play?
It actually came into play when the record was sketched. I had most of the record sketched out, probably more than 15 or 16 songs. And in listening to them, I started to feel like there's a story here. I was putting them in an order, and it's almost like when you put puzzle pieces together and you start to see an image.
Yeah.
Because they were all written individually. They were all written to be purely music that I wanted to express with lyrics that my brother and I often co-wrote that we wanted to express.
Hmm.
But then I called up some friends of mine in the comic book world. I know a lot of folks there, and I said, I just where I guess I skipped a step. I called them because I thought we could make a graphic novel. Where did that idea come from? I think ultimately it came from The Wall.
Yeah.
I was like, I think there's a story here, but I need help. I need help crafting it because I've created all these songs, and I found some great writers and artists that we sort of assembled. And the fun of it for me was I've spent the last 20 years writing stories to fit me. I'm sorry, writing music to fit
Hmm.
stories.
Right.
Somebody makes a story, they give it to me, I write the music to fit it. So we got to flip that around. I wrote the music first, and then I worked with writers and artists to shape a story to the music. Um,
Right.
but I think it was really like going back to those memories of when I was a kid listening to The Wall and just imagining like, what is this? There's a story, there's a movie. I got to go find the movie, but I'm looking at the artwork, and there's a story in the audio. You know, like digging through the track titles, trying to piece it together. I loved that. I loved that idea.
Yeah. Well, we've got so everybody knows, the graphic novel is coming out on May 8th, correct?
Correct, from Image Comics.
Image Comics, and then May 12th is the release date of the album, The Singularity. On
Actually, that's the show. The
Oh, that's
record
the show. So
will be available digitally on May 3rd.
May 3rd. Thank you for correcting me.
All
I
good.
knew I'd have a date screwed up in there. So
There's a
May
lot of
3rd for the album on every format you could possibly imagine. May
Yep,
8th for the graphic novel, May 12th for the show at the Fonda Theatre.
correct.
Okay,
Los
cool.
Angeles.
No, I
Yeah.
just wanted to make sure I got that out there without forgetting about it, because I'm
Cool.
going to ask you. I'm going to go a little off Singularity for a second, just because you've got so much that you've done. I didn't know until reading the press notes that you were a protege of Elmer Bernstein.
It's true. Yes.
And how did that even come to pass?
All right. So around the time that I was writing Escape from the Machines, when I was 15, I was my the local Rotary Club picked me to be student of the month in my junior year. So I went to this ceremony at the Rotary Club, and there were all these old guys, and they said, "Oh, he's interested in film scoring. He wants to go to USC in Los Angeles and study film music." And this guy comes up to me. His name was Joe Coons, and Joe says, "That was really interesting. I've got a friend in the industry. Maybe you'd like to meet him." And I was like, "Okay, man, like whatever. Who could you possibly be friends with?"
Right, like some guy that scored like, Hobgoblins or
Oh,
something.
exactly. Or like, I honestly thought he was gonna say the guy who writes like the jingle for the local news or something,
Right.
like cable access.
That's who you generally will expect. You're not expecting a big
Yeah.
name.
I mean, and I grew up in Bellingham, Washington. It's a little town. It's the last town of any notable size before
Right.
the Canadian border on the water. So it's like, he goes, "Have you heard of Elmer Bernstein?" And I mean, my brain explodes,
Yeah.
Yes, obviously I knew the Ten Commandments and the Great Escape
Right.
and the Birdman of Alcatraz, but it's like Ghostbusters, Animal House,
Right.
like Spies Like Us, like all these 80s comedies that I grew up on. Heavy metal, dude. Talk about an influence on my project now.
Right, for
This guy
real.
wrote the music for heavy metal.
Yeah.
So I flipped, and I offered to give Joe some of my music, and Joe sent it to Elmer. It included Escape from the Machines. Elmer
Whoa.
Bernstein heard that. And it turns out Elmer kept a boat. Remember I said Bellingham's on the water. He kept a boat in the harbor. And this guy ran the like boat club. And Elmer would take a sailboat up the Canadian coast every summer. And he happened to keep his boat in Bellingham. And that's how I met him. And I started working for him. I worked for him for nearly a decade and ended up archiving his scores, and like,
that's amazing.
It was incredible, man. I mean, and just getting all the stories. I mean, this is a guy who worked with everybody. I mean, he worked with Cecil B. DeMille. He worked with Michael Jackson. I mean, it was like everybody in between. And he was just the sweetest man you can imagine. And he really inspired me. I mean, that's when I had already decided, I knew I wanted to do music and I wanted to do film music, but I hadn't really met anyone in the business. How could I have? And when I met Elmer, I was like, okay, that's the life I want.
Yeah. I mean, where were you thinking you were going musically before that? Were you just figuring you'd be in a group?
It was film music, man.
It was always film music?
I wanted to score movies when I was 5.
Yeah, wow.
So I didn't even start listening to rock music until I was about 12 or 13. And it was only through Danny Elfman and Queen and other artists, Pink Floyd, The Wall, that were doing things in movies. And then I started going, well, this is awesome. I watched Highlander and I'm like, what is this music? What is this? Danny Elfman, my favorite. I loved Oingo Boingo. And like, he's, I'm sorry, I loved his movies. And so I found Oingo Boingo.
Reversed.
So
I was the opposite, because I was a big Boingo fan as a kid.
Yeah.
And I was like, and then he started being tapped by Tim Burton. I'm like, oh, this is interesting. And then Batman came on. I was like, holy crap.
Exactly. It's
a major deal now. And there he went.
Many of those guys are on my record. Steve Bartek, John Avila.
I saw, That's really cool.
And I think if you listen to the Automaton's Heart, that Steve Bartek guitar solo is unmistakable. It sounds like classic, like mid 80s Boingo. There's a song, a Danny Elfman song called Gratitude in particular, that Bartek has this solo that's insane. And I just told him, I go, man, I want a Gratitude solo, and he delivered. He crushed it. I love Boingo. But
that's awesome.
that's kind of how I got into rock, was through cinema and big kind of epic stories. And so I think in a way, like when you piece that together, you realize like I've been doing this for 30 years. It's just that over the last 20 years of my film career, I haven't like just straight up put out a record before. But all that energy and love for rock music is there. Yeah.
What was your first head gig as a composer on something?
You ready for this one, man?
Sure.
It was a television show called Battlestar Galactica.
That was the first one. Okay.
Bro, I was like 24. They
That's,
should.
I mean, I didn't know if you would, I didn't investigate all your credits.
It's all good, man.
I didn't realize Battlestar Galactica was actually your first.
They
That's
should.
pretty major.
They should never have let that happen. You know that, like, to let a 24-year-old child
Yeah.
or your multi-million-dollar, sci-fi epic. I was an assistant on the miniseries, and when it went to series, I got the chance to score one episode. And I thought that I was going to say I did one episode of Battlestar Galactica. That's amazing. And then it went well. They said, "Why don't you come in tomorrow and let's take a look at the next one?" And it on like that, and that's really where my career went. I was very fortunate, and I also had done all the work. By 24, I'd been scoring so many student films. I'd been conducting my own orchestras. I've been writing film music since I was like 10, writing in that style.
Wow.
While it was a lucky break, on top of that luck, I had done a ridiculous amount of preparation. So I truly was maybe a very prepared 24-year-old.
Yeah.
But yeah, that was it, man. And that opened a lot of doors for me, to say the least.
Which thing do you think, based on what you have right now, is easily the thing most people recognize you from?
I don't know, because here's the thing. My career is odd. To some people, I'm the God of War guy. I was in the games. I've had people come up to me and they go, "You're God of War," and I go, "Oh, thanks." And they go, "It was so awesome that you got to be an actor in that. Do you play the games?" And I realized in talking to them, they don't even know I did the music. They just recognize my face from a role I played in the games. To many people, I was like Battlestar guy. To other people, I'm Outlander. Outlander has a huge fan base.
Yeah.
To some people, I'm the Lord of the Rings guy. To some people, I'm the Godzilla guy. It's actually amusing to me when I see online like what people associate with me. So I'm not even in a position to say. I mean, I'm very lucky that people or anything,
Well, the first time I really remember seeing your name on anything was The Walking Dead. So that's going to be, if you ever see me on the street, not from this interview. You're the Walking Dead guy.
I love it. And you know what? I love that. Just a couple days ago, people started sending me photos from their phone that I was a clue on Jeopardy for The Walking Dead.
That's nice.
It was like Bear McCreary used tremolo strings to compose a theme for this zombie show that launched in 2010. And I was like, all right. That really, you know what, to really answer your question, like if I had to pick something, to many people, I think it is the Walking Dead, and I'm proud of that, man. I mean, I was on that show for a dozen years. But even if I had only written the 40-second main title, I would still be proud of that. That main title is cool, man. That's
a show I will admit, like, I've watched a number of times, and it's not going to be one of those shows I would ever put in my top 10, but man, there is just, because it's I think, and this is my personal opinion, if they had let I forgot what his name is, the guy that started what's that?
Oh, sorry. I thought we were gonna talk about Glenn.
No, the guy that started
Frank. You're talking about Frank, the guy that started the
Frank
show?
Darabont. Yeah. I think if Frank had been in control of the entire series, I think, it would have probably been a little bit more cohesive, but there's so much greatness on that show that it's still watchable.
That's how I think about it, that like we made so many episodes. It is impossible to have every single one of them just be as perfect as those first 6 were.
Those first 6 episodes were. Even the second season,
I was gonna say,
I think is really good.
People were a little annoyed by the slow burn, but for me, the payoff.
I think the second season. I mean, I know there's a lot of talk behind the scenes that AMC got a little cheap on the second season, and so they had to kind of scale back what they were going to do. But I also think that lended an immediacy and an intimacy where these people weren't running amok everywhere, which it ended up kind of becoming in a way. But that's me as a fan being a little, being nitpicky and stuff like that. But
Well, you're the first, Brett.
the
You're the first.
score was always so good. Yeah, I know. I'm sure there are plenty of people on the internet bitching about everything. So
yeah. No, it's true though. But I've gotten to work on just a great many really cool genre projects, and I always feel like I got struck by lightning multiple times with landing a project like Walking Dead or Marvel's Agents of Shield was a big one.
Right.
That was a lot of fun.
Yeah, you're doing some of these instances. You're doing these shows that they're sometimes on at the same time. How do you? And this will probably be my final question because I think I'm stretching past the time limit. But how do you multitask doing different shows at the same time?
Thankfully, I've never done shows that are similar, right? I mean, I was working on Walking Dead and Outlander concurrently for almost a decade. But each has their own personality musically, and I really find it refreshing to be able to switch gears. And like, if sometimes I'd be in Walking Dead for so long, I'd have to stop, and then I go, oh my god, wait, I got a new episode of Outlander. I'm gonna write a beautiful love theme featuring bagpipes. The opposite of Walking Dead.
Yeah.
And I have a team that I've built up over the years that helps me on the TV side, picking up a lot of these cues, and so that television it takes a village to raise that baby. And so thankfully I've always thrived in multitasking. Even in college, I was scoring multiple student films at the same time. And that kind of prepared me, I think, for working on the Singularity, where every part of it was in different phases of production at different times. And I actually, it's not like how do you survive that? I prefer that. I find it energizing to be able to switch gears and come back.
That's perfect. Well, Bear, man, thank you so much for taking the time today. I really enjoyed talking with you about the Singularity again. It's out on May 3rd, all formats. May 8th is the graphic novel on Image, and then May 12th at the Fonda Theatre is the hopefully first of many representations live of the Singularity. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thanks, man. This has been a blast.
All right, you take care.
Take care, man.
All right, bye.